This story was written by Tobias Malm, one of my favorite authors. Please check out his new novel, The Cave to Another World, a story about a world where humanity never evolved. A link will be in the description below. Every time I close my eyes, I'm transported back to that fateful summer. The events that unfolded seemed like a never-ending nightmare, and the scars they left behind are still raw. But I've made it back home, and after much reflection and contemplation, I know that the story needs to be told. Maybe it's a way for me to come to terms with what happened. Or perhaps it's to warn others of the horrors that can lurk in the shadows, and sometimes even in the light of day. Whatever the reason, I'm ready to share it now. We were driving on Route 1, the sun shining down on us as we made our way toward Richmond, Virginia for a honeymoon. Shanice was behind the wheel, her hand intertwined with mine, and I couldn't help but smile at how lucky I was to have her as my wife. It had been a long trip, and we were both tired from the wedding. We couldn't wait to check in at the hotel and finally start our life together. It had been a long journey to get to this point in our lives, as we had faced many challenges and obstacles along the way. But we had always stuck together, supporting each other through thick and thin. Shanice looked at me, exhausted, but still as beautiful as ever. Here Comes the Sun by the Beatles played on the radio, and as the sun continued to shine down on us, we sang along to the lyrics, feeling grateful for the love and joy that surrounded us. The scenery passing by was breathtaking, and I took it all in, realizing how truly blessed we were to have each other and this moment. As we neared our destination, excitement built up inside of us. We looked forward to the adventures and memories we were about to create. I had never felt more at peace. Then, something interrupted that peace. A bang came from the sky, like thunder, but sharper. It was so powerful that Shanice almost lost control of the vehicle. For a moment, I felt nauseous, and then the song on the radio glitched out and was replaced by a harsh male voice.
According to eyewitnesses, a large submarine was seen cruising along the coastline of Havana earlier this morning. The witnesses claimed that the submarine appeared to be of Japanese origin and was flying the flag of the rising sun. The sighting has not been confirmed by authorities, but the reports are being taken very seriously.
There was a whistling sound piercing through the air, growing louder and more intense by the second. And maybe a mile ahead of us, we saw a bright, glowing object streaking toward the ground. "My God," said Shanice as she slowed down. "What is that?" The song on the radio came back intermittently, but kept glitching out. "It must be a meteorite," I said, my voice filled with excitement and awe. "That's incredible." There was a loud boom to our right, and the car shook as a part of the meteorite must have hit the ground, creating a massive explosion. I could feel the heat of the impact even from where we were. "Whoa," whispered Shanice, her eyes with shock. "That was something else." She pulled over. Some dirt landed on the hood of the car. "Do we call someone?" I don't know." I looked at the smoke rising from the crater. "Where did the bigger one go? It should have hit the ground by now." But it hadn't. It was as if it had disappeared altogether. "Let's get out and check out the crater," I said with some excitement, now that my shock has subsided. "Wait." Shanice put her hand on my shoulder. "What's up with the radio?" I hadn't paid any attention to it. It was still broadcasting the other channel. But there was a woman talking now,
potential implications of a conflict between the British Empire and the Empire of Japan, and they are taking all necessary measures to prevent it from escalating.
What about it? I said. Let's get out and they said something strange just now. Didn't you hear it? Something about... She looked worried. Just listen for a second, okay? An elderly man was now talking. It sounded like a recording of a speech.
Confederate States of America will continue to work with our allies to ensure peace and stability in the world. We believe that diplomacy and dialogue are the best means to resolve disputes and maintain stability in the international community.
I felt nauseous again. The column of smoke coming from the crater next to the road appeared almost sickening now. Although, I couldn't tell exactly why. I swallowed nervously. It's just some radio show, honey. She changed the channel.
Well, Bob, the Return to Africa bill was definitely a step in the right direction when it came to giving African slaves their freedom after the so-called Great Slave Surplus in the 60s, when modern farming equipment replaced, I would say, most slaves on the working fields. However, it also had the unintended consequence of creating a shortage in the construction industry that's still felt today. A lot of people are arguing that it's time to end the practice of slavery on a national level, pointing to the success of the British, and even the Japanese, who both abolished slavery long ago. They also say the practice makes our people look indolent. Some even go as far as to use the word lazy in the eyes of the international community. What do you think about that, Mary? Are the American people ready to give up?
What the hell? I said. That's another channel? What's going on, James? Shanice looked at me, her eyes filled with fear. It's just a coincidence, I said as I picked up my phone. Try another channel, you'll see. I'll call 911 and alert the authorities about. Actually, I don't have a signal. Do you? She was already looking at her phone. No, me neither. With a trembling hand, she tuned the radio to another channel yet again. A strange, opera-like song was just fading out and was replaced by the voice of a cheerful man.
Are you looking for a reliable and hard-working servant? Look no further than South Shore Trading Company. Our servants are the best in the business. They do the hard work for you, so you can relax and enjoy your time. We have a wide selection of servants to fit your needs, from cooking and cleaning to gardening and childcare. Get the help you need with our top-notch servants. Visit South Shore Trading Company today and get the perfect servant for your family.
Shanice turned off the radio and stepped out of the car. I followed her. She was trying to light a cigarette. Let's drive to the nearest town and report the meteor impact from there, I suggested. And whatever is going on with the radio, I don't know. It must be some kind of collaboration between the stations to spread awareness. We must have just missed the context, that's all. I mean, what else could it be? Something isn't right, Shani said. I'm feeling off. Like something is just wrong. That thing from the sky. Don't you feel it? I did feel it. A feeling of impending doom. But I didn't want to admit it to myself. And since it didn't seem to make sense, I didn't want to worry my wife further by mentioning it. All good reasons to get out of here, I said. We got back into the car. Shanice took the passenger seat, too upset to drive, and let me take the wheel. I took one last look at the column of smoke. A part of me still wanted to check out the crater, to see what was hiding in it. But by now, it was nothing more than morbid curiosity. All excitement was gone. I put the pedal to the metal. The dust from the impact blew off the windscreen as I made sure we got out of there as fast as possible. After driving for some time, without turning on the radio, the dread that had settled in me didn't go away as I would have hoped, but rather increased. Something was off. but I couldn't put my finger on what it was. Shanice, constantly checking her phone to see if the signal was back, didn't say much. But I could tell she was feeling the same. An odd-looking truck drove past us in the opposing lane. It had a strangely prolonged hood, and the trailer attached to it was reminiscent of a classic wagon, albeit made of black metal. The body of the truck was a weathered brown, and the large black wheels and rugged tires added to its unusual appearance. Just before it passed, I noticed the driver, an elderly black man wearing a gray corporate overall, looking down at us with a facial expression of disbelief. "What the hell kind of truck was that?" I said. "Did you see that?" "Maybe we should go back?" Shanice bit her nails, as she always did when nervous or stressed. "I'm telling you, something absolutely crazy is going on. It's not just the meteor, the radio, or the truck. It's everything. I know it sounds silly, honey, but I don't think we should continue down this road." I drove to the side of the road and stopped the car. "I'm freaked out too," I said. "But what could possibly be going on? We could have been killed by that meteor, and we're both still in shock, I think. Now, we can't go back, for sure. But this is supposed to be our honeymoon, and do we really want whatever this is to ruin that? We should be in Ashland soon. Maybe we should at least go there and..." A harsh siren, reminiscent of a fire alarm, came from behind us. I looked in the rearview mirror. A police car, similar to the strange truck, but smaller and more aerodynamic, had pulled up behind us. Two officers, wearing leather jackets, black boots, and Stetson hats, stepped out of the vehicle as soon as they turned off the dreadful sirens. Shanice was shaking next to me, anticipating something I couldn't even imagine. I locked the doors to the car and put my hand on the car key, getting ready to get out of there. As they walked up to our car, I saw in the rearview mirror that they were both wearing the Confederate flag on their sleeves. "Those aren't real cops," Shanice yelled, probably after noticing the same thing. "Just drive!" I turned the key, and the engine roared to life. I stepped on the gas pedal, and the car lurched forward. The officers quickly jumped back into their own cars and began to pursue us. I made a U-turn and began driving back toward Washington. The police car, or whatever it was, remained close behind us, its flashing lights filling the car with an eerie red glow. Shanice was crying and yelling at me to go faster. I drove as fast as I could, but the police car remained at our heels. I couldn't believe nor understand what was happening. All I knew was that we had to get away from those men and get in touch with the real police. Up ahead, where the meteor had hit the ground, I noticed that a roadblock had been set up, blocking our escape. I swerved onto a dirt road, hoping to lose our pursuers, but their vehicle was too nimble and followed us. Eventually, we came to a small town. Here I thought the madness had to come to an end. We just needed to find some normal, decent people and get in touch with the authorities. "Oh my God," Shanice said. "It's everywhere." In front of us, outside what looked like a town hall building, was a flagpole flying the Confederate flag. I pushed the car to its limits, swerving around corners and accelerating from straightaways. The people on the sidewalks looked at us in astonishment. The clothes they wore were a strange, eerie mix of bygone eras, as if they stepped straight out of another time. The women were draped in long, flowing dresses that were reminiscent of the 1940s, with their hair styled in soft waves and their lips painted a deep red. But there were also touches of a more archaic style, with corsets peeking out and parasols clutched in their gloved hands. The men too were dressed in a way that was both familiar and foreign. They wore suits with white lapels and suspenders, but the trousers were cut higher, almost to the knee, and the shoes were shiny and black with large buckles. The overall effect was unsettling, as if they had somehow stepped out of a dream and into the modern world, still dressed in the garb of a long-gone time. The road ahead split in two directions. I had to make a quick decision. I swerved to the left and took a sharp turn, only to face down another one of those strange police cars. I stepped on the brakes and was just about to back up when the other car showed up behind us. "Fuck!" I yelled. "What do we do?" Shanice asked. "James?" The officers stepped out of their cars and surrounded us, all of them with their hands on their holsters. One of them, a tall man with a narrow face, knocked on the window next to me with his baton. Reluctantly, I rolled down the window, feeling my heart in my throat, and grabbed Shanice's hand. "Step out of the vehicle, both of you," said the man. "You are under arrest." "I don't understand," I said. "What's up with that flag? With..." Another officer, a short man of heavy build, appeared next to the tall man. "Toyota," he said with a sudden drawl. "Sounds Japanese." "The flag," said the tall man. "Which flag? You are arrested for evasion of the law and reckless endangerment. Now, you're going to step out of the car, or do we need to pull you out?" "This is insane," I whispered under my breath. "Look, I don't know what twisted, racist reenactment, role-playing game, or sheer fantasy you're trying to live out. But last time I checked, this was still the United States of America, and what you're doing to us is illegal." The officers laughed. "We're not in the US anymore," Shanice said. "James, don't you get it?" What? I said, confused. "This is ridiculous." "So, let me get this straight," the officer said with a smirk. "You're driving around in a strange Japanese vehicle, dressed like I don't know what, and you're suggesting that it is us that lives in a fantasy world. You need to step out of the car and come with us to the station. It's either that or the hard way, which none of us want." "This isn't our world," Shanice whispered. "Something happened when that meteor hit. Something impossible. I just know it. I felt it instantly." "Okay, but what do we do? I'm terrified." "We have to play along. That's all we can do now." The officer knocked on the roof of the car with his baton. "No more babble. Get out of the car." "Okay." I slowly opened the door and stepped out of the car, Shanice following close behind. The officers still had their hands close to their guns, ready to grab them at a moment's notice. The officer closest to us searched us, taking our phones and wallets, before leading us to their police car. The officer receiving the items accidentally lit the display of one of our phones and dropped it out of surprise. His colleague bent down and picked it up. "Don't you ever watch the Vision Box, Earl?" he said. "These devices just released in Japan. If you ask me, we're dealing with two spies here." "Turn around and put your hands behind your back," the short officer said after he placed us next to their car. I did as I was told, feeling the cold metal of handcuffs being snagged around my wrists, and so did Shanice. "Please, sir," I said, trying to appeal to their sense of reason. "We don't mean any harm. We just want to get out of here and get on with our honeymoon." "Don't tell them anything," Shanice hissed. "Are you crazy?" "Your honeymoon will be spent in jail," said the tall officer. "As it should," said the short one as he placed us in the backseat of the police car. "Seeing that your marriage isn't legal here. Or did you get married in Japan?" He laughed. "And then you came all the way here with your weird little Japanese car, dressed like complete jetsers, to celebrate your marriage where it's least appreciated. And this story just keeps getting crazier and crazier." They took us to a small, dingy police station where we were thrown into a cell. The officers left us there without saying a word, leaving us to our thoughts. "What did you mean when you said we weren't in the US anymore?" I asked, leaning against the bars of the cell. "Are you suggesting this is some kind of alternate reality?" That's exactly what I'm suggesting, she said. I think that meteor teared up the fabric of our reality somehow. And that's insane. I shook my head. We're dealing with a group of deranged people who's living out some far-right wet dream. It's just a bunch of QAnon that's come together in this little backward town, and what about the radio, huh? Shanice interrupted. They could have easily hijacked it somehow, I said. I don't know, but... And the strange vehicles? You think they designed it? You think they designed and built their own fully functioning make-believe cars as well? What you're suggesting isn't exactly more believable. Listen, James. I'm telling you. We passed through some kind of rift in space-time. Or, I don't know, some kind of interdimensional portal, and now we're stuck in a world where the freaking Confederacy won the Civil War. I spotted a newspaper underneath the bed Shanice was sitting on. I picked it up, hoping it would prove her wrong, but was instead met with more evidence to the contrary. It was called the Richmond Examiner. Based on the date, it was only a week old. The headline of the main story read, "Crisis in the Pacific. British and Japanese fleets clash." I sighed and tossed the paper at Shanice. They really paid attention to the details. These people are trying to get under our skin, trying to brainwash us, possibly to force us to do something which will... Shanice, who had picked up the newspaper, interrupted me. This is real. Listen to this, okay? She began reading from the newspaper. It has been several weeks since tensions between the British Empire and the Empire of Japan reached a boiling point, with reports of a Japanese fleet creating a blockade around the Hawaiian Islands to the Confederate States of America's decision to allow the British Empire to place nuclear weapons on the islands. The move has been seen as a direct threat to Japanese security, leading to a build-up of military presence in the region. She paused. James, they got pictures and everything. And why would they pick this as their main story if it was fake? Wouldn't they pick something more domestic? She continued to read. The crisis has been escalating, with both sides refusing to back down. The British Empire, with its powerful naval presence in the Pacific, has deployed additional vessels to the region, while the Japanese fleet remains on high alert. The situation is rapidly deteriorating, with fears of an all-out war becoming increasingly real. Anyone can fake anything these days, I said. You know that. Let's just try to think of a way to get out of... The tall officer entered the room. He sat down on a wooden stool in front of us, his earlier aggressive expression now calm, and lit a cigar while looking at us with a piercing gaze. I'm Carlos, and I'm the sheriff in this town. He took a puff in his cigar. You're James and Shanice? Am I pronouncing that correctly? Robertson, at least according to those little cards we found in your wallets. On those cards, it actually says you're from the United States of America. That's curious, seeing that the United States of America doesn't exist anymore. Your Japanese equipment tells me you're spies, hired to accomplish some mission. But then again, why would spies come up with some ridiculous fiction rather than trying to blend in? Maybe you aren't spies at all, but just activists trying to make a statement. If so, I'm guessing you're a former servant, Shanice, rebelling against the system. I ran both of your names through the calculator, and nothing came up, which is another oddity. Perhaps you are spies after all. Anyhow, this case is a bit above my pay grade, and my colleague decided to report you to CLE. What's that? Shanice asked. Why, the Confederate Law Enforcement Agency, of course. They'll pick you and your equipment up and transfer you to Richmond. That's what's going to happen. He leaned forward and lowered his voice. Here's the thing though. I think there's something more going on than what I'm being told, and I would very much appreciate it if you would tell me what it is. All I know at the moment is that something fell from the sky earlier today, just outside of town, and now they've cut off traffic on Rebel Route, telling everyone there's been a gas leak. Why would we tell you anything? Shanice asked. You were the one. I'm going to be upfront with you. Carlo said with an even lower voice. I don't like when the government comes to my town, lying to my face and telling me what to do. And I don't like how they treat your people. He looked at Shanice. I know about that lie, and it's the ugliest of them all. In my youth, I worked at one of the so-called temporary detention camps after they passed the Return to Africa bill. He took a deep breath. I was just a kid back then, but I understood what they were doing there. And it wasn't freeing any slaves. What did they do? I asked, sick to my stomach. You've already heard the so-called conspiracy theories. Well, I saw it with my own eyes. It's all true. What conspiracy theories? Shanice added. You really don't know about this stuff? Carlos took another puff and looked at us with suspicious eyes. It was just another slave trade. Only a handful was shipped to Liberia as free men. The vast majority was sold to Belgian Congo and some other colonies where they needed more workers in the mines. But even there, the need for more workers wasn't big enough to accommodate our surplus. Carlos looked down at the floor. So, they built these large chambers, looking almost like churches you see everywhere besides the road. And they took them there. The ones unfit, too old, too young, and the ones unwilling. Then, what did they do? Shanice asked, tearing up. What did you do? It was so crowded in there. They were all standing shoulder to shoulder, not knowing what would come next. I was just a kid back then, but they still sent me in there to clean up after the process was done. And that's what I did. This was close to Matanzas, and being of Spanish descent, I wasn't valued much higher than the former slaves. I was just trying to help my parents pay rent. Anyhow, I won't be sending any one of your people their way if I can prevent it. You know, when I see the more rebellious wakes up north hanging up the Union flag in their windows or front yards, I wonder what it would have been like if things were different. If history had taken another turn, so to speak. It's a childish fantasy. But seeing you and your possessions, your strange car, your curious electronic devices, and your odd-looking plastic cards with the United States of America written all over them, well, it makes me wonder. We aren't spies. Shanice walked up to the bars. That thing that fell from the sky, it came from space, and it had some kind of effect on. A group of men in black coats flung open the door and strode purposefully into the room, radiating an air of confidence and command. Carlos stood up and straightened his back, leaving his cigar on the stool. Good morning, sir. We're from CLE, one of the men said in a deep, authoritative voice. We're here to take the prisoners with us, the colored woman and her companion. They're suspected of espionage and high treason. Would you be so kind as to open their cell? He did as he was told, locking eyes with us, but not saying anything. This can't be real, I said, still doubtful, but less so than before. Hey, don't touch her! Carlos let go of Shanice's arm and allowed her to step out by herself. This isn't right, Shanice said to Carlos as we were led outside by the men. You know this isn't right. It's all wrong. We don't belong here. The men didn't say a word to us. They just threw us in the back of a large black vehicle that looked more like a locomotive than a truck. They had already loaded it with our car. Shanice banged on the back doors after they closed them, begging them to let us out, but to no avail. We sat in total darkness as the vehicle drove away. I held Shanice in my arms, trying to comfort her the best I could. They're driving on the open road now, I said. If the police spot this bizarre vehicle on the road, they'll pull it over and— You still don't understand? Shanice said. I did understand, and it frightened me more than anything. But I still held up hope that there was a more mundane explanation to all of this. I don't know, I said. I just don't know. But we're going to get out of this situation, one way or another. After about 45 minutes, the vehicle hit the brakes. I wasn't ready and fell down, and so did Shanice. We struggled to get up on our feet, but then threw ourselves on the floor again when we heard gunshots outside. I crawled up to Shanice, trying to find her in the darkness. We heard people yelling, and then some more gunshots. A man's voice could be heard behind the back doors shortly after. "Stay back and take cover." He then shot at the lock, and the door swung open. We were pulled out of the vehicle by strong hands. It took a few seconds for my eyes to adjust to the daylight. Two black men, wielding rifles of a sort I had never seen before, stood in front of us. They wore what looked like fedoras, but were otherwise dressed as the men we had seen in the small town. "Go!" one of them said. "Go, go, go!" They rushed us to another vehicle. Shanice stopped in her tracks. At first, I thought it was because of the dead bodies on the road. But then, she quickly entered their truck and came out with a cotton bag with the word evidence written on it. It contained our personal belongings. The two men yelled for us to hurry up. Just before I jumped into their car, I noticed Richmond in the distance. The city was unrecognizable from what I remembered. Gleaming white marble buildings towered over the landscape, adorned with grandiose statues and flags bearing the emblem of the Confederacy. At that moment I knew Shanice had been right all along. This was another Earth. With a sense of unease creeping up my spine, I take a seat at my desk and prepare to dive back into the story. The memories are still fresh, vivid, and haunting. But I know I can't leave it unfinished. So with trembling hands and a pounding heart, I take a deep breath and begin once again. The two men escaped the chaotic scene and drove away with us in the backseat. My mind tried to process what I had just witnessed. The men in the car with us were silent, and we didn't dare to speak. After a while, one of them turned to us and said, "You're lucky we found you. If we hadn't, you would have never seen the light of day again. Now, who the bloody hell are you? Why did you rescue us if you don't know who we are?" I asked. "A friend of the cause said you were important and told us about the transport." The man next to the driver said, "He said you could be of help in our struggle. Now, who are you?" "We're not from around here," Shanice said. "We're legally married in this country, and we were on our way to our honeymoon." "You're from New York or something?" the driver asked. "Coming here for your honeymoon?" "No," I said. "But listen, something strange is going on. On our way here, something fell from the sky, and it..." I was interrupted by two strangely round helicopters appearing overhead. The driver took a small turn and continued up a smaller road, which was covered by the canopy of some trees, and sped up. It was a meteor of some kind, or maybe something else. "A meteor?" asked the man next to the driver. "Our source told us you had some connection to the Japanese, but that he didn't believe you were spies. So what's your deal?" "We do some dealings with the Kempitai. Sometimes, and only when it benefits the cause." "We're Shanice and James Robertson." Shanice leaned in between their seats. "And we're from the United States of America." "Is this some kind of game?" asked the driver. Anyway, I'm Omar, and my friend here is Khalid. We're members of the AJS. What's that? Shanice asked. Some socialist movement? Say what? Asked Omar. You don't know about AJS? The African Jacobin Society? The only true rebels in this country. The one and only revolutionary organizations fighting for the old liberté, égalité, fraternité. Having evaded the choppers, we entered a garage adjoining a dilapidated house in what looked like a poor suburb. There were some other people staying at the house, sitting in a circle and having a discussion. The youngest was a 10 or so year old girl. As soon as we stepped out of the car, they all stood up and looked at us suspiciously. Omar introduced us to them, still holding his rifle, as if ready to point it at us at a moment's notice. These are the people we were told about. He spoke to the group. Shanice and James. They claim to be married and from the United States of America. Now, in our hearts, we're all from the United States of America. But I'm getting the feeling they mean something stronger. And not only that, but they're also affiliated with the Japanese somehow. I know it's difficult to believe, I said. We were traveling down what you call Rebel Route, which is called Route 1 where we're from. And then out of the blue, something came down from the sky. We think it was a meteor, Shanice continued. A part of it crashed right next to our car, and the rest of it mysteriously vanished from the sky before it hit the ground. Otherwise, it would have destroyed the entire region. Fairy tales, said an old man in the group. This what you risked your lives for? That's what you risked revealing our position for? They must have escaped a mental institution. This isn't a story by Jules Verne. It's reality. It doesn't matter, says Khalid. They were transported inside of one of Klee's armored wags. Granted, it was traveling alone. But still, these two individuals are clearly important to them, which means they're an asset, no matter their bizarre cover story. You aren't going to sell us out, are you? Shani said. Because that would be ironic. And we aren't lying. There's something going on beyond our "we won't give you up," said Omar. But we didn't rescue you only of the goodness of our hearts either. We're fighting for freedom and enlightenment for everyone. And you're going to have to play a part in that fight, whether you want to or not. I'm hoping you will do it willingly. If you're Japanese spies, you should want to bring down our government just as much as we do. Shanice picked up her phone from the evidence bag. In our world, where we're from, the Empire of Japan, the British Empire too, dissolved a very long time ago. Democracy won, slavery was abolished, and the United States became one of the greatest nations on Earth. That's the truth. She held up her phone. And I can prove it to you right here, right now. She turned on her phone and unlocked it. This, just seeing the device turn on, seemed to create a bit of a reaction. Is that European? Asked the woman. I've never seen such a small VB before. It's American-made, I said, while Shanice went through her album. We call it an iPhone, but the more generic term is a cell phone. I'm guessing you have those as well? Oh, a mobile phone, said the little girl. Yeah, we have those, but they don't light up like that. And the most popular one is called a Dixie dialer. It's kind of both a calculator and a phone because you can access the netway on it. Okay, said Shanice. Watch this. She held up the display and then played a video she took during a large Black Lives Matter rally in Washington, D.C. Thousands of people, mostly African Americans, had shown up. American flags, the good version, could be seen everywhere, and the Capitol building could clearly be seen in the background. The group looked at the screen, confused and bewildered, judging by the looks on their faces. I want to see too, said the girl, whereupon Omar picked her up and let her watch as well. What's going on? She then asked. This is our capital, Shani said. Washington, D.C. I can't believe my eyes," said the old man. "That building was burned to the ground a long time ago. How on earth is this possible?" "We don't know," I said. "It had something to do with that meteor." After the video finished, everyone was silent for a moment. Omar sat down on a chair with his face in his palms, most likely trying to make sense of what he had just witnessed. In a matter of minutes, a big part of their worldview had been shattered. The little girl spoke up before anyone else. "You said slavery was forbidden in your world? But then why was everyone shouting all those things?" Shanice crouched down and faced her. "What's your name?" "Celine." "Well, Celine, even on my Earth, people still treat our people unfairly. Just as the idea of the United States never died here, the idea of the Confederacy never died on my Earth. An idea can't be killed easily, for better or for worse. So even where I'm from, we have to fight every day to keep racism at bay." "It's real then," Khaled said. "I don't know how else to explain it. Sure, we have moving pictures, but nothing even come close to that. And certainly not on a small device. Not even the Japanese ones. What now? What does this mean?" A discussion ensued, and it was hard to keep up with what everyone was saying. Some argued for exploring the possibility to trade with our world. Some argued for showing the black community the video to inspire hope and get the revolution going. And some argued it was all just some kind of trick, even after what they had seen. In the end, Omar raised his voice. "We need to focus on the here and now. This can mean a number of things. Great things for sure. But for now, we have to focus on how to make use of this unique situation right now. I say we set up a trap for Klee. They'll be desperate to get their hands on Shanice and her husband. We can use that to negotiate the release of some of our leaders, maybe even Leon Moreau. We could decide on a place that's to our advantage, and then we ambush them. Having some of our captured leaders back would mean a lot to the cause." "Hold on," Shanice said. "If we're going to be debate here, we need some guarantees that once all of this is over, you'll help us get back home. From there, if it's at all possible, we can establish some kind of alliance between our worlds." Omar stepped up to her and grabbed her shoulder. "By the light of truth," he said, "I promise we'll do what we can to help you when it's time." "You would need to help us get back to the impact crater," I said. "They've set up a roadblock there, possibly a base, and it's heavily guarded." "What do you all say?" Omar asked the group. "Once we've lured Klee into our trap and freed whomever they're willing to trade, are you willing to get your hands dirty yet again to help our new friends and to establish contact with our brothers and sisters in their world?" Everyone nodded in agreement. A plan was quickly formed. They would set up a meeting place in a secluded area outside of the city and make sure to have enough people and weapons to take on Klee. Shanice and I would be the bait, just as initially suggested, and would have to be ready for anything. The very idea of it caused my heart to race with anxious anticipation. Shanice felt confident that we could trust him, but I wasn't equally convinced. Did they truly believe us? And did they value us enough not to sacrifice us to get their people back? The odds didn't really matter though. This was the only alternative. Our only hope. Later in the evening, after most of the planning was done, we sat with the group in front of what they called a vision box, or VB for short, and watched the news. Everyone was silent as the anchor, a blonde woman with a Confederate pin on her blazer, read the news.
Good morning, America. Tonight, we bring you the latest developments in the escalating crisis in the Pacific. The world is on edge as the Empire of Japan sent its naval fleet to Hawaii to stop the British Empire from deploying nuclear weapons on the island. The situation is getting tenser by the hour, and the threat of war looms over the region.
Footage of the naval fleets in the Pacific, with ships and submarines moving about, appeared on the screen.
Emperor Satoru has made it clear that he will not allow Hawaii to become a nuclear weapons platform.
The anchor continued.
And has issued strong warnings to both the British Empire and the Confederate States. The CSA has responded by mobilizing its own naval fleet into position, and tensions are high as the two sides stare each other down.
A map of the Pacific with markers showing the positions of the fleets was shown as the anchor continued.
The stakes could not be higher in this game of brinksmanship. With the world watching, the slightest miscalculation could lead to a catastrophic conflict that could engulf the entire globe. The Japanese fleet, led by the fearsome Tsukuba aircraft carrier, is a formidable force that has the capability to strike at Hawaii with devastating force. Meanwhile, the British fleet, which includes the newest and most advanced battleships in the world, is determined to protect their allies and their strategic interest in the region.
Back in the studio, an expert commentator was interviewed.
This is an incredibly dangerous situation,
he said.
The Japanese are known for their fierce pride and their willingness to fight to the death. They see the deployment of nuclear weapons in Hawaii as a direct threat to their national security, and they will not back down easily. The CSA...
These maniacs, said a young woman in the group who appeared to be Celine's mother. Don't they understand that we're living on the same planet? They would rather see it destroyed than in enemy hands, said Omar, who had his hand wrapped around her shoulder.
There's a new calculator game that's taken the gaming community in the Confederate States by storm,
continued the news anchor.
But it's also causing some controversy among certain groups. The game, an ice cream truck simulator from a French software company, has become incredibly popular among families, with gamers of all ages enjoying the fun and lighthearted experience. However, there is one character in the game that's caught the attention of some Confederate citizens. The game features a female ice cream vendor who is dressed in a revealing outfit, a so-called French swimsuit, which is illegal in most states, that some believe to be inappropriate for a family-friendly game. The French company has defended its character design, stating that it's meant to be a fun and playful representation of the ice cream vendor profession, and that they had no intention of causing...
Omar turned off the screen. It's getting late, he said. Let's meet here tomorrow morning. You two can stay here with me and Yolanda. Yolanda, Celine's mother, turned toward him. Isn't that dangerous? What about Celine? Relax, said Omar. Khaled, could you please stay as well? Just to make sure we're all safe as we can be. Yolanda didn't seem too happy about it, but she accepted. The next few days were a blur of preparation and anticipation. We trained with the African Jacobin Society and learned how to use their weapons. Shanice and I shared our knowledge of advanced technology and strategies from our world, albeit on a very basic level, which seemed to amaze and inspire the group. Celine followed us everywhere and asked us endless questions about our world and our lives, and Shanice was always happy to tell her stories. Finally, the day of the ambush arrived. Omar made contact with Klee and successfully made some kind of deal with them. The sun was shining almost mercilessly, and the air was thick with tension. Shanice and I were dressed in clothes provided by the group, and we both had weapons concealed on our bodies. We were ready for whatever was to come, although it didn't feel like it. I sat next to Shanice in the backseat of Omar's car. The radio was on, playing unrecognizable pop songs, and Khaled, next to Omar, held a burning cigarette outside his window. They seemed relaxed, albeit still worked up. Shanice held my arm tight. I tried to stay calm for her, but it was useless. My heart was racing, and I constantly had to wipe the sweat off my forehead. We arrived at the agreed-upon location. A deserted industrial area outside the city, 1 hour or so before Klee was to be expected. They parked the car in a secluded part of the area and remained seated. The AJS had their men placed everywhere, ready to ambush Klee as soon as they arrived. All there was left to do now was to wait. It wouldn't be long, but every second felt like an hour. The music on the radio, now put to a low volume, came to an abrupt stop.
You're listening to A.OK. America, your source for all things happening in the Confederate States of America. We interrupt this song to bring you an urgent update from the Pacific. Reports are coming in about a major explosion in the waters near the Hawaiian Islands. Details are scarce at this time, but sources say that the explosion occurred in the vicinity of a Japanese naval vessel. It's unclear at this time what caused the explosion or the extent of the damage, but it's believed that this could be a significant event in the ongoing standoff between the British Empire and the Japanese Empire in the Pacific.
Khaled turned up the volume slightly.
The Confederate government has yet to release an official statement regarding this incident, but it's likely that this will only escalate an already precarious situation. We will continue to monitor this developing story and bring you updates as they become available. In the meantime, we advise our listeners in the Pacific region to stay tuned to A.OK. America for the latest news and updates on this developing situation. Now, some words from our advertisers before we resume our regular.
I think they're here now, said Omar. Get ready. We drove down to the open area in the middle of the complex where the prisoner exchange was supposed to take place. One of Klee's armored vehicles stopped a few yards from us. For a few minutes, nothing happened. I pressed Shanice's hand. It will all be alright, she said. As soon as this is over with, we will find a way back home. I gulped, wiping sweat from my brow. I'm so damn scared. Me too. Shanice kissed me. But this is important. This means something. Maybe we were sent here to help this world somehow.
We have some new developments in the ongoing standoff in the Pacific.
The host on the radio was back.
According to sources, the explosion earlier was not an accident. It appears to have been a deliberate attack by an unknown vessel. The Japanese have issued a statement accusing the British Empire of launching the attack, while the British have denied any involvement. As things seem to be happening quickly now, we'll stay on the air covering this story as it develops.
2 people finally stepped out of the vehicle in front of us. They were dressed in the same black cloaks as the agents from earlier. One of them opened the back of their vehicle while the other one spoke into a megaphone.
We will now present the prisoners. Step out of the vehicle and show us the individuals known as Shanice and James Robertson.
One of their helicopters circled above, and a number of additional armor vehicles could be seen further down the road. Khaled, now holding his rifle, yelled out of the window. Show us, Leon, or there's no deal. I looked at the rifle I concealed under my jacket, hoping I wouldn't have to use it. If they showed Leon first, the plan was to attack immediately, seeing that it was the most important one to them. In that case, me and Shanice wouldn't have to get out of the car. That was unlikely to happen though, as they knew how much they wanted Leon back. Instead, they were in all likelihood going to show us someone of less importance first, after which the AGS would have to show me or Shanice in exchange for seeing Leon.
You know that's not the deal.
The agent yelled back. I could feel my heart racing and my hands growing slick with sweat. Shanice's fingers brushed against my own, and I could tell she was just as anxious as I was at this point. We have to be ready for anything, I whispered, my eyes never leaving the Klee agents in front of us. Shanice nodded, her grip on her weapon tightening. And then, as if on cue. The CLE agent who had spoken through the megaphone made a sudden movement, and I heard the unmistakable sound of a gunshot. I couldn't tell who had fired, or why, but in a split second, everything turned into chaos. The AJS fired down from their hiding places. The vehicles down the road, never having turned their engines off it seemed, drove up to us at full speed. Armed men, dressed similarly to a SWAT team, rushed out of them and opened fire in all directions while running toward our car. Shanice acted on instinct, pulling out her rifle and returning fire. I followed her lead, unleashing a hail of bullets that echoed through the deserted industrial complex. Khaled turned to Omar.
"Get us out of here, now!"
he yelled.
"They never intended."
A bullet pierced the back of his head, blood splattering everywhere. For a few chaotic moments, it was anyone's guess who would come out on top, if anyone at all. AJS members emerged from other vehicles, exchanging fire with CLE agents who were scrambling for cover. I caught glimpses of AJS members darting through the shadows, taking down their enemies with expert precision. But the CLE agents were no slouches either, and their own firepower was formidable. Omar, seemingly in shock, finally stepped on the gas, kicking up a cloud of dirt with the tires as he made a sharp U-turn and raced toward the exit while yelling for his people to retreat, even though no one could possibly hear him. Explosions and gunfire echoed behind us, but I didn't look back. We reached the highway that luckily wasn't very busy. Two of the armed vehicles and a smaller, sleeker vehicle with its sirens on followed close behind us. Omar took a sharp turn and drove down a ramp that led to a smaller road. The helicopter, like a giant horsefly, flew at a low altitude a few yards to our right. Khaled's dead body was tossed here and there in its seat as the car turned and Omar had to push it away from him time and time again. I couldn't imagine a way for us to get out of this situation. More police cars appeared behind us as we approached Richmond. This was the kind of situation that never ended in favor of the pursuit.
BBN is showing some footage now,
said the host on the radio with a trembling voice.
There's images of a flash of light, followed by a massive eruption of water in a shockwave. The destruction is catastrophic. I fear the worst. This is a nightmare. If this was a nuclear explosion, it's hard to overstate the magnitude of the damage. The fallout from such an event could have far-reaching implications for the entire world, as we have been hearing from experts all morning. We are now seeing images of smoke and debris filling the sky, and it's clear that this is a truly devastating event. Our thoughts and prayers are with those all affected by this terrible tragedy. This is, no doubt, a critical moment in history, and it's important for the Confederate government to act swiftly and decisively to ensure the safety and security for all those in the Pacific.
I couldn't fathom what they were saying in my state of shock. But Shanice picked up on it and said, "It's all falling apart, James." The sun beat down on us as we careened through the streets of Richmond. I looked at Omar in the rearview mirror in front of him. His face was set in a grim expression as he navigated the twisting roads. The white marble buildings of the city rose high on either side of us, the grandiose statues standing out in sharp relief against the clear blue sky. We were passing a giant statue of Confederate General Robert E. Lee when I heard the sound of gunfire from behind us. I spun around in my seat, my hand going to the concealed weapon at my side. The armored vehicles and chopper that had been pursuing us were still on our tail, their drivers intent on capturing us at any cost. Shanice was shouting for Omar to speed up as he swerved to avoid obstacles and civilians. I could see the determination on Omar's face in the rearview mirror as he put the pedal to the metal. His driving skills pushed to the limit as he weaved between other vehicles and narrowly avoided collisions.
Just moments ago,
said the host on the radio,
we received troubling news about the British Broadcasting Network. Reports coming in that BBN, the official news network of the British Empire, has abruptly stopped broadcasting. We are unsure at this time what has caused this sudden halt, but the situation appears to be serious. Rumors are circulating about people hearing air sirens on BBN's latest live broadcast, nothing has been confirmed. We are unable to get in touch with our London-based correspondent. Our attempts to reach her have been met with silence. This development only adds to the already tense situation in the Pacific, with the recent reports of a possible nuclear explosion in Hawaii. It's unclear whether the cessation of BBN's broadcasts is related to the ongoing conflict. Lady Margaret Russell has not yet issued a statement on the matter, and it's unclear what steps they are taking to address the situation. As always, AOK America will continue to provide you with up-to-date information on this developing.
As we approached a right turn, Omar slammed on the brakes, and we skidded around the corner, the pursuing vehicles hot on our tail. I could hear the sound of metal scraping against metal as we collided with obstacles in our path. But Omar never slowed down. I could see a giant statue of Stonewall Jackson up ahead, his stern visage seeming to judge our desperate flight through the city. The Clee vehicles were closing in, but just as it seemed we were out of options, Omar spotted an opportunity. He veered sharply off the main road and onto a narrow side street, the pursuing vehicles unable to follow as they were forced to slow down to navigate the tight turn. We shut down the alleyway, the sound of our engine echoing off the walls. Omar expertly navigated the tight corners and narrow passageways, keeping us one step ahead of our foes. Finally, we burst out onto a wider street, the sound of our pursuers fading in the distance behind us. I breathed a sigh of relief. But then, the oddly shaped helicopter descended right in front of us, whipping up a thick cloud of dust and debris, and reducing our visibility to nearly zero. The noise was deafening as the helicopter descended, the whir of the blades slicing through the air like a razor-sharp knife. Omar brought our vehicle to a screeching halt, throwing the gears into reverse as we struggled to avoid colliding with the strange machine. The next thing we knew, we were surrounded by both Clee and the police. For a few moments, we sat in silence as more and more officers arrived with their guns pointed at our vehicle. The only thing we heard was the radio, filling us with just as much dread as what was happening around us.
Just now, a video surfaced on the netway showing what appears to be a missile launch from the state of Virginia. The video is grainy, and it's difficult to make out the exact details, but it's clear that these are some sort of long-range missiles being launched into the sky. I repeat, we have just received footage of a missile launch from Virginia. We do not know the intended target or the reason behind this launch, but we are working to get more information as soon as possible. Wait, hold on. We are receiving an emergency alert. Let me play this for you. This is an emergency alert. All residents within a 100-mile radius of the following cities, Richmond, Virginia, and Washington, D.C., are ordered to seek immediate shelter. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Take cover now. Step out of the vehicle,
yelled a uniformed man into a megaphone.
You're surrounded, and we will use force if necessary. This ends now.
Omar looked down at his dead friend, only sadness visible on his face. Then he turned to us. "I'm truly sorry," he said. "I don't know what went wrong. This wasn't supposed to happen, and now the world seems to be falling apart. Our journey ends here, my friends. Do you want to surrender?" "What difference would it make?" Shani said. The emergency alert was still being broadcast, over and over and over again. "I'm so sorry, James." I felt a lump in my throat as my heart sunk to my stomach. Clee agents slowly approached us, their fingers ready on their triggers. All of a sudden, a deafening alarm cut through the air, drowning out the man with the megaphone and causing everyone to pause. The siren was unlike anything I've ever heard before, a deep, pulsing sound that seemed to vibrate through my bones. The agents and police officers around us looked confused, no doubt unaware of the breaking news. Then, a few of the police cars drove away, most likely disobeying their orders to stay put. The man with the megaphone turned around and shrugged. Someone beckoned him to return to the helicopter. For a few moments, people were frozen in confusion, awaiting orders or information. But then, more and more of their vehicles began driving off, and when the helicopter started its engines, everyone panicked as if they all instantly understood what was approaching.
Drive!
Shani said.
Drive, drive, drive!
Omar, as if jolted out of a reverie, quickly shifted the car into gear and sped away. No one paid any attention to us anymore. The officers, still standing on the street, just watched us as we drove past them. Further ahead, people were running for shelter, while others remained sitting at restaurants and cafes, as if waiting for everything to blow over. As we drove past an imposing building, I craned my neck to take a closer look. The marble dome of the structure was enormous and gleamed in the sun. The white columns of the facade rose high into the sky, and I could see a large Confederate flag flapping in the breeze. On the front lawn, there were several large black vehicles parked, and I could see people in gray uniforms hurrying toward them. A large helicopter was taking off from a pad, its blades churning the air and making a deafening sound. I guessed that it was their Capitol building, and thought about how in just a few minutes it would be reduced to rubble. For a second, I found some comfort in the thought of all of this being swept away by a radioactive blast wave. But then I thought of all the innocent people that would suffer, and my comfort turned into a deep sense of sorrow. Omar flung the door open to his house. He yelled for his wife and daughter, desperately and with tears running down his cheeks. At first, it didn't look like anyone was home. But then Celine appeared in a doorframe, holding her doll close to her chest. Omar rushed up to her and picked her up in his arms. "My little girl," he said, and kissed her forehead. "Where's Mommy?" "She went to the city to buy some food," she said. At that very moment, a light many times brighter than the sun flashed outside the window, blinding us. The sound that followed was deafening, like 1,000 thunderclaps all at once. The house shook and debris rained down from the ceiling. Omar instinctively shielded Celine with his body, trying to protect her, and I covered together with Shanice behind a sofa. Luckily, we were far enough away from the blast for the heat wave to not cause any serious harm. But the shockwave hit us hard, knocking us off balance. As we got up, we could hear the sound of shattered glass and the clattering of metal outside. "We have to get out of here," I said, my voice barely audible over the ringing in my ears. Omar nodded, his eyes filled with fear and sorrow. He picked up Celine and motioned for us to follow him. We made our way through the rubble, careful to avoid stepping on any broken glass or sharp edges. As we stepped outside, we could see the mushroom cloud forming in the distance, its ominous shape rising up into the sky. Slowly, the blue sky from just moments ago was swallowed up by the smoke from the firestorms in the city. And as the sun shone through it, the landscape was colored a sickening shade of orange. Outside, the scene was one of complete devastation. Buildings were in ruins, cars were overturned and burning, and survivors were running in all directions, some screaming and crying, others silently staring at the destruction. Here too, the air was thick with smoke and dust, and the smell of burning metal and chemicals filled our nostrils. "We need to find a way out of here," I said, my voice trembling with fear. "We can't stay here much longer, or the radiation will get us." The car we had come with was blocked by a tree that had fallen. "Omar," said Shanice, "we need a new vehicle." Holding Celine in his arms, he brought us to their garage. The car there was luckily unharmed by the blast. "But where do we go?" he asked, almost as if not fully there. "We're going back to the crater on Rebel Route," Shani said. "It's our only hope now. This world has nothing more to give." Omar nodded absent-mindedly. He told us to get into the car. I sat down next to him, while Shanice placed herself next to Celine in the backseat. "Are we going to get Mommy?" asked Celine. Omar froze in place, clearly unable to form the necessary words. "We need to go get her," continued Celine. "She might not be able to find her way back home alone." Finally, Omar turned to her. "We'll try our best to find her, sweetie," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But right now, we need to focus on getting to safety. Your mother wouldn't want us to stay here and get hurt." Celine could see on her father's face that he wasn't telling her the truth, and she burst into tears. Her cries racked through her tiny body, her sobs full of fear and loss. The tears streamed down her face, her chest heaving with each breath as she clutched her doll tighter. Her heart was being ripped apart, and the weight of the world was crushing down on her small shoulders. Although she couldn't understand it, she now knew she had lost the most important person in her life. Omar, now crying himself, leaned over the front seat and pressed his daughter's hand. Shanice and I exchanged a pained look. And then Omar returned to the wheel and turned on the engine. As he did so, the radio came on. The emergency alert had been replaced by a female version of Dixie's Land. Undoubtedly the last song ever to be broadcasted in what now once was the Confederate States of America. Omar turned the radio off and slowly drove into the inferno outside. The road was mostly empty, indicating how few had managed to escape the city before it was too late. The further away we got from Richmond, the clearer the sky became. Soon though, the smoke would find its way here as well. Colossal pillars of smoke could be seen on the horizon no matter in what direction we looked, and they were all slowly but surely consuming the sky. When we arrived at the location, we approached the tents that had been set up around the meteor crater carefully. There was a man standing next to a police car, holding his Stetson hat and smoking a cigar. I immediately recognized him as Carlos. By now, it was clear he had been the one who told the AJS about our transport to Richmond. He shook Omar's hand, expressing his regret when he noticed that Yolanda wasn't with us. "I came down here soon after Richmond was hit," he said. "Everyone's gone. They all left. Most people in town left too. Someone said we were too close to the city. Something about the radiation. I was about to leave too, but I wanted to check this out first. And let me tell you, there's something here that's unlike anything I've ever seen before." "The crater?" I asked. "Let me show you," he said, and took a puff on his cigar. We followed him towards the biggest tent, located where I expected the crater to be. And just as I thought, it was there. Carlos walked up to the edge and beckoned us to join him. "My God," said Shanice as she looked down into the hole. "It's beautiful." At the bottom of it was a small pile of a strange material. The substance looked almost like a liquid, with a shimmering quality that seemed to change in the light. It was an otherworldly shade of violet. But as I looked closer, I realized that it seemed to contain bits of every color imaginable, as if they were all swirling together in an indescribable dance. "It's making me nauseous," I said. I felt the same thing just before it hit the ground. It just feels off. "This is our way back," Shani said. "It's what brought us here, and I believe it can bring us back home." I picked up a rock and threw it down the crater. Before it reached the bottom, it vanished. It must be some kind of rift in reality. Shanice grabbed Omar by his shoulders. "Come with us. There will be a place for you and Celine there. We'll find a way to integrate you into society. You'll be free.
And you too, Carlos. All we have to do is jump down that hole and...
I'll stay, Carlos said. I have responsibility for the people left in town, and someone needs to stay to rebuild. Eventually, the dust will settle here. Or maybe it won't. But I got to try. Besides, someone has to make sure this meteor doesn't fall into the wrong hands.
And you, Omar?
Shani said.
Please, think of Celine.
Omar nodded in his typical way. Then, he shook Carlos's hand. Thank you, friend. I would have stayed and helped you rebuild. But I have to think about Celine. I need to do what's best for her. This world has nothing but misery to offer her. Carlos watched as the rest of us approached the edge of the crater, holding hands. Celine stood next to her father, holding her doll, still sobbing. Shanice counted to 3. And then, we jumped. As we fell through the rift, the world around us warped and twisted, colors blending and shapes distorting in a way that made me feel sick to my stomach. It was like being caught in the middle of a kaleidoscope, but 1,000 times more intense. I closed my eyes and braced myself for impact. But when I opened them again, we were no longer falling.
Where are we?
Asked Celine. I opened my eyes. We were all laying down on the ground. There was no crater here, just some grass. Next to us, there was some kind of probe that must have been sent through the rift from the other side. It had the Confederate flag painted on its side. Further away, I could see a road. We all got up on our feet and walked toward it. It didn't take long for a car to stop for us. This question might seem strange to you, I said. But is this the United States of America? The lady in the truck laughed.
Oh, why, of course it is. What happened to you people? Are you okay?
A smile appeared on Shanice's face, and tears formed in her eyes.
We were on our way to our honeymoon and... You know what? It's a long story. Would you mind giving us a ride?
I'm on my way to Richmond, said the lady.
I can drop you off there.
I turned to Omar, who held Celine in his arms. Welcome to the United States of America. Prepare to see Richmond, as you've never seen it before. We all crammed ourselves into the car. And as it drove away, we sat in silence, too tired to speak, as the car radio played Survivor by Destiny's Child. Shanice rested her head on my shoulder, and, listening to the lyrics of the song, I somehow knew that everything would be alright. From now on,